I received a phone call from the ministry which asked me to go to Mysore and assume the charge of Director AIISH, even if it is midnight that day. But I went the next day on 20th April and assumed charge as Director of the Institute, in which position I stayed till 19th July 2006. I'll characterize this period as a period of development in AIISH history, no aspersions cast on anybody. In my very second meeting of the Executive Council of the Institute, Dr. C.P. Thakur, the then Union Health Minister, gave approval for deemed to be university status for the institute, but that was only the first stage in the entire process. Later, a proposal had to go from the ministry to the Ministry of Human Resources, who will in turn refer it to UGC. UGC will do all the processing and inspection, send its recommendations to the Ministry of Human Resource Development, who will give approval or no approval, then to be documented by UGC later. I had approval from the ministry, but we didn't have the infrastructure required by UGC to be granted a deemed to be university status, and therefore we started the developmental work. There was development in all spheres of activities of the institute: clinical services, training programs, research, and other domains. But let me briefly touch upon the development seen in the domain of clinical services. We started OPD services. We made it compulsory for all faculty members to be present and run halfway day OPDs at least. There was preschool training program in a rudimentary form only for hearing impaired children. We started preschool training programs for clinical groups consisting of hearing impaired children, mental retardation, cerebral palsy, and others, and a third group with children having learning disability, autism spectrum disorder, etc. The program was started in 3 languages: Kannada, Malayalam, and English. Later, Hindi classes were added. Children in the age group of 2 to 4 years and 4 to 6 years were included for this preschool training program. A therapy park was built. It was actually a therapy cum amusement park to facilitate work in the preschool training program. Children coming to the preschool training program were coming at 9 o'clock in the morning and were getting some of the other training: speech language therapy, auditory verbal therapy, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, sensory training, etc. till 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. For this purpose, we appointed physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and special educators. I started specialized clinics in the area of professional voice disorders, craniofacial anomalies, phonology, and alternate and augmentative communication. Cochlear implant program was started for the first time. One Dr. Girish Kulkarni, ENT surgeon from the Apollo Hospital, who had been trained in Australia and in Kochi, operated on our patients at AISH. One Master Sai Shakti and Master Abhilash were the first two children who underwent cochlear implant program, and it was a great success. The jewel in the crown clinical program implemented was the proposal from the institute to the ministry for implementation of a national program on prevention of hearing impairment in the country. There was a meeting of our Executive Council on 21st March 2005, which was chaired by Dr. Anbumani Ramadas, the Health Minister. He asked me to submit a proposal for implementation of this project. I submitted a project. There were discussions, presentations on that. Finally, Dr. Anbumani Ramadas was happy and he entrusted the task of implementing the project to Director General of Health Services in the ministry, which was the right thing to do. Many more meetings followed and discussions continued. The Director General of Health Services later entrusted the responsibility of finalizing the proposal to our good friend and a senior ENT surgeon, Dr. Agarwal from Ram Manohar Lohia Hospital, New Delhi. From then on, we could perceive conflicts between the requirements of audiologists and intentions of ENT surgeons. The focus in the AIISH proposal was on early identification of congenital deafness and institution of management services, whereas ENT surgeons wanted identification of middle-ear disorders to be given priority, the justification being it can be easily corrected. The ENT surgeons did not want any management protocol to be part of this project. They wanted the Ministry of Social Welfare, Government of India, to institute programs for the management of persons who are identified with hearing loss. With much discussion and persuasion, the medical group agreed to make a provision for dispersing hearing aids under the program. It had been decided to implement the program on a pilot basis in 25 districts of the country, and Karnataka got 3 centers. I selected the districts of Hassan, Mandya, and Hubli and Dharwad in Karnataka for pilot implementation. I selected Hassan because Sri Kumar Swamy, the then Chief Minister of Karnataka, hailed from Hassan district. Sri N. Chilvarai Swamy, the then Karnataka Health Minister, hailed from Mandya district, and the Karnataka Institute of Medical Sciences at Hubli had the infrastructure and the motivation to implement this project. So therefore, these 3 centers were selected. A meeting was taken by the then Health Secretary, Sri Prasanna Hota, on May 10th, 2006, to discuss on the recommendations of the working group on the project. I was present, and with me, Mr. Vijay Nandur from Hyderabad, an audiologist, was also present in that meeting. It was decided to implement the project on a pilot basis. The decision was formalized in a meeting held on the same day in the evening at India International Center, which was chaired by the Union Health Minister, Dr. Anbumani Ramadas. Later, a central coordination committee was constituted with the Director General of Health Services as chairperson and Mr. Agarwal as convener. I was a member in that coordination committee. Following this, I had to leave the institute in July 2006, and thereafter I was not part of this project. The more significant changes during my tenure as director were in the domain of training programs. The BSc curriculum had not been updated for quite some time. The general opinion at that time was that we were studying too much of psychology and related subjects. We were not studying anything in neurology, otolaryngology, linguistics. Nobody can say that these were not important for understanding the complex phenomenon of speech, language, and hearing. Therefore, with active cooperation of the University of Mysore and the Rehabilitation Council of India, the BSc curriculum was thoroughly overhauled. We made a provision for studying otolaryngology, linguistics, and neurology in the BSc curriculum itself. In addition, we added a component of pediatrics, genetics, research methods, and epidemiology. There were many who did not like the changes, but ultimately the opinion of the larger majority has to prevail. We had a combined MSc program in speech and hearing, which was instituted in the year 1966. Whoever instituted the program then had a particular logic, and it was appropriate for that time. But nobody can say that speech language pathology and audiology of 2002 was the same as the speech pathology and audiology of 1966. Worse, most of the students who successfully completed MSc speech and hearing were practicing either speech language pathology or audiology. Therefore, 50% of the training they had received was almost not utilized, which is not economical. Therefore, I gave a proposal for bifurcation of MSc Speech and Hearing into MSc Audiology and MSc Speech Language Pathology. With great difficulty, I could get approval from the University of Mysore, Rehabilitation Council of India, UGC, and the ministry. For all those who doubted the bifurcated programs of MSc Audiology and MSc Speech Language Pathology, I want to tell them that the students who are trained in these new programs are no way inferior to those of us who are trained before 2002. Apart from these developments, I instituted 3 training programs at the institute: a diploma in ear mold and hearing technology, a Bachelor of Special Education program in hearing impairment, and a Master of Special Education in hearing impairment. I could successfully get the approval of University of Mysore and other statutory bodies. Plus, the University of Mysore declared Bachelor of Special Education Hearing Impairment as equivalent to Bachelor of Education General Degree. This was very important as far as the job potential for these successful graduates. The zone-wise reservation pattern we had for admission to BSc Speech and Hearing course was not working well. Therefore, I scrapped it. Even with the reservation pattern, most students appear to come from Kerala and Karnataka to the program. I introduced the national level entrance examination in physics, chemistry, maths, and biology. Exams were conducted at several centers across the country, including Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, and Kolkata. The entrance examinations resulted in a non-discriminatory pattern and gave a fair chance for everybody to get admission into our BSc Speech and Hearing program. Sometime in the year 2003-2004, the Rehabilitation Council of India came up with the proposal of clinical internship for BSc Speech and Hearing students. The duration of the program was to be enhanced from 3 to 4 years. The All India Institute of Speech and Hearing played a major role in determining the characteristics of this internship program. I introduced a certificate course for caregivers or mothers of children who may be having mental retardation or hearing impairment or learning disability. It was a 4-month certificate course. The prospective candidates had to study one paper on general disability issues and one paper pertaining to either hearing impairment or mental retardation or learning disability. The certificate program drew enthusiastic response from mothers. 65 mothers enrolled for the program in the first year itself. I encouraged research to a great extent during my tenure at the institute. First, the PhD program had to be revived. ISHA was not giving fellowships to any of its PhD students, and thus there were no takers for the PhD program since 1992. I instituted 4 fellowships on par with ICMR and DST New Delhi, and in the very first year of revival, 14 students applied for our PhD program. The trend continued in the coming years. In the year 2001, I established an AIISH research fund with an initial grant of rupees 10 lakh per annum, which was later increased to rupees 20 lakh per year. Under the fund, the staff and faculty members of AIISH could take up short-term research projects. The scope of the fund was later expanded, which allowed professionals in the area of speech and hearing and its allied areas, but working in government institutions in the country, could take up collaborative research projects with AIISH, with one of the faculty members at AIISH being a co-investigator. There was no mechanism to give ethical approval for research projects at AIISH. Therefore, I instituted an ethics committee under the chairmanship of retired Justice Mr. Sadashiva. All these efforts were reflected in the number of projects that staff and students of AIISH submitted, in the increased number of conference presentations, in the increased number of publications in national and international journals, and most importantly, in the number of awards won by our staff and students at ISHA national conferences. The staff and students of AIISH won nearly 35 of the 50 awards given away by ISHA in its annual conferences between 2002 and 2006. It's very gratifying indeed. In the year 2003, the S&T Mission Mode of the Ministry of Welfare, Government of India, awarded me and Dr. Ashish a project to develop indigenous technology for FM hearing aids. We developed the technology, came out with a prototype, but the effort did not see the light of the day as no industry came forward for mass production of the device. It was disappointing. One of the last decisions I got from my executive council, which met on 19th December 2005, for the second time in that year, was to institute postdoctoral fellowships. But before I could implement the decision, I had to leave the institute. I was associated with 2 more projects at this time outside the institute. In the year 2003, the Department of Electronics, Government of India, had awarded a project to the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, Trivandrum, for development of indigenous technology for body-worn digital hearing aids. The project was under Professor R. Ravindra Kumar. I was invited to be a member of the expert group in the year 2004, and eventually I became the chairman of the project review and steering group. The investigating team came out with a very good product named Tarang. We were discussing with Indian industries for the mass production of this device. We were also discussing with foundries in South Korea and Singapore for mass production of the ASIC chip that goes into these digital hearing aids, at which time I left the institute. Later, Professor Ravindra Kumar applied for grants to develop technology for behind-the-ear digital hearing aids, but I was not a party to that. I was associated with one project with the National Institute of Mental Health at Hyderabad. The Supreme Court had directed the Director General of Health Services, Government of India, to develop a simple tool for identification of autism in children. The project was entrusted to the National Institute of Mental Health, Hyderabad. I was invited to be a member of the expert group, and again, I became the chairman of the steering group. The investigating team came out with a very simple and effective tool for identification of autism. The medical lobby was so strong that they did not allow use of the word diagnosis in the name given to this tool. Their logic was autism can be diagnosed only by qualified neurologists and psychiatrists. As this device is going to be used by speech pathologists, clinical psychologists, and other non-medical professionals, the word diagnosis cannot be used. Eventually, we named the tool developed as Indian Scale for Identification of Autism. I left the institute in 2006. Dr. Govind Rao, the then director of NIMH, also retired from the institute in 2006. Later, the Director General of Health Services took away the project to his office at New Delhi and later notified the two. I implemented a number of schemes and projects during my tenure at the department outside the sphere of teaching, research, and clinical services. I brought in a scheme of rotationship of HODs, a measure to welcome new thoughts, new ideas, and more importantly, to reduce the administrative responsibilities of any one given faculty member. I put in place a scheme of assessment promotion for the faculty members. Under the scheme, any faculty member could get a higher position after 4 years of service, provided his or her performance is good. Even a professor, after 4 years of service, can hope to get director's pay scale depending upon his or her performance. I established a number of new departments. The nature, responsibilities, and status of the departments of electronics and department of speech sciences were elevated. I established a department of material development to come out with multi-modal public education material. I established a department of special education with 6 special educators and 2 faculty members, mainly to take care of the responsibilities of preschool training program. The headship of the department was given to a faculty member from the Department of Speech Pathology. I established a new department of clinical services, which helped us to streamline all clinical services and establish new programs in the area of clinical services. I established a student welfare fund for the benefit of the students. I established a staff welfare fund with the generous grant of rupees 50,000 per year from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. I put in place a Vidya Vikas program to encourage and help children of staff members of the institute. A program by name AIISH Darbar, a cultural vaganza for students of the institute, and intercollegiate cultural program was launched in the year 2002-2003. At the Executive Council meeting held on 19 December 2005, I had approval for establishing a Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology at the Northeastern Indira Gandhi Regional Institute of Health and Medical Sciences, Shillong, Meghalaya. Before I could implement the decision, I left the institute. I don't know why the decision was not implemented by my successors. The institute did very well in the area of public education. We came out with a lot of public education material, both in the print and visual medium. Kirti, publicity and information officer of the institute, who came from a journalistic background, was instrumental in the institute getting wide publicity in both print media and electronic media. At the end of my tenure, we conducted a writers' workshop with sponsorship from Karnataka Literacy Mission and Directorate of Mass Education, Government of Karnataka, wherein artists, craftsmen, playwrights, computer specialists, writers participated. And we came out with a number of different types of public education material in the form of posters, audio and video cassettes, street plays, stories, drama, poetry, etc. The Karnataka Literacy Mission promised mass production of these public education material, but I don't know what happened after I left the institute. As director, I had a chance to go through the records of the times when the institute was established. For the sake of records, and as some people have recognized, let me state that the All India Institute of Logopedics came into existence on 9th August 1965. The All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, as we know today, was established on 10th October 1966. It's not just a change in the name. The entire structure of the institute, the administrative pattern, and decision-making process is different in the new institute. Dr. B.M. Rao, the first director of both All India Institute of Logopedics and All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, was a very strong man. And I understand from the records that at the time he took charge as director of the institute, probably the ministry had promised him autonomous status for the institute. And after some time, the ministry was dilly-dallying on the promise. So Professor B.M. Rao wrote a very strong letter in his own handwriting in green ink, which I have read, drawing the attention of the ministry to the promise they made and threatening the ministry that he would quit if the promise was not kept. Prompt came the decision to establish All India Institute of Speech and Hearing and as an autonomous body. I understand that initially the proposal from the institute was to establish or was to institute a postgraduate diploma in speech and hearing. And I think Dr. K.L. Srimali, the then Vice Chancellor of the University of Mysore, shot off the idea. The University of Mysore said that they have nothing to do with this if the institute wants a PG diploma. We don't know what happened later, but ultimately the institute came up with the great proposal for starting a postgraduate program in speech and hearing. Only Dr. Ratna, who was there at that time, can throw more light on this. I returned to NIMHANS in July 2006 And for the next 5 years, nothing significant happened in my professional career. I was doing some clinical work, some teaching work, and some research work. Three students were working with me for their PhD starting from 2009. Two of them were working in the area of auditory neuropathy spectrum disorder, more specifically on auditory dysynchrony. The third was working in the area of aphasia. I was promoted as senior professor in 2012, and at the same time, I was nominated as Dean of the Faculty of Neurosciences. I had a lot of work in the administrative and policy formulation domains by virtue of my position as Dean. I was also chairman of the Internal Ethics Committee, responsible for giving ethical approvals for master's and doctoral programs. I was member secretary of the NIMHANS Central Ethics Committee, responsible for giving ethical approvals for intramural and extramural project proposals. Sometime between 2013 and 14, all my students completed their work and got their doctoral degree. After that, I was busy in the publication work of their results. NIMHANS rules stipulate that no person retiring can take students or projects for 3 years before his retirement. As Dean of the Faculty of Neurosciences, I had a lot of opportunities to meet and interact with some of the great dignitaries of this country. I had a chance to meet Mr. Justice Santosh Hegde, Professor Radhakrishnan, Chairman of ISRO, our Health Minister, Sri Venkaiah Naidu, Vice President of India, and to top them all, the Prime Minister of this country, Sri Narendra Modi. Rehabilitation Council of India seems to be the favorite whipping boy for everybody. Rehabilitation Council of India was registered as a society in the year 1986 and became a statutory body in the year 1993, following enactment of the Rehabilitation Council of India Act in 1992. The Act was later amended in the year 2000 to make it more broad-based, to include certain categories of medical professionals as rehabilitation professionals. The mandate of the Rehabilitation Council of India is to regulate and monitor manpower training programs in different areas of disability and to maintain a central rehabilitation register of professionals in different areas of disability. Considering the mandate given to the RCI, we should say it has done exceedingly well by recognizing 678 institutions all over the country, by registering more than 150,000 rehabilitation professionals in different areas of disability, and regulating and monitoring 60 training programs in the regular mode and a further 25 programs in the distance mode. We, the speech and hearing professionals, should have less to complain about RCA. RCA has been extremely good to us. Thanks to the initiative taken by speech and hearing professionals, RCA has regularly updated curriculum of speech and hearing training programs, has sanctioned more continuing rehabilitation education programs to the field, and approved and adopted policy documents like scope of practice of speech and hearing professionals. One of the tasks that RCA has to do in giving approvals for institutions and training program is to stipulate a number of requirements on the infrastructure side. And these stipulations are made based on the expert opinion received by professionals in that given area. RCI itself doesn't do that. So in this task, the needs and the demands of the private sector can never be in consonance with the requirements of a public body like Rehabilitation Council of India. Therefore, disappointment is inevitable and conflict is inevitable. This is there, whether it is Rehabilitation Council of India or Medical Council of India or Dental Council of India. It is one thing to say that RCI can do much more than to say RCI has failed. That would be a travesty of justice. In any case, I hope that RCI will continue to work together with the Office of the Chief Commissioner of Disability, Government of India, under the Persons with Disability Act 2016 and the offices of the National Trust Act 1999 to create better infrastructure for the management of the disabled in the country. Indian Speech and Hearing Association, as we all know, was registered in the year 1967. My involvement with ISHA was off and on. No doubt, I was attending conferences of the association, but my major involvement with ISHA was to organize the Silver Jubilee Conference at Bangalore in 1993. Later, I organized the 36th conference of the association at Mysore in 2004. Both these conferences were well organized. Apart from the pomp and the pageantry, innovative programs, gifts to the delegates, these two conferences are better known for the books that we published. In 1993, we published a book by the title 30 Years of Speech and Hearing in India. ISHA also published a monograph on diagnosis and management of fluency disorders, authored by Dr. Savitri and I. This was the first monograph published by Indian Speech and Hearing Association. In the conference in 2004, we came out with 3 publications, one on alternate and augmentative communication, the second one on vestibular disorders and their management, and the third one was on disability-related issues in India. Sometime in 2003, the association was in the danger of losing its registration because of non-compliance with regard to auditing of accounts and timely submission of records to the Register of Cooperative Societies. ISHA asked me to see if I can do something on this issue. We came to know that the draft letter of cancellation was ready, but the final letter had not been issued. Goswami and I think Dr. Goswami was the treasurer of the association then, we contacted the Registrar of Cooperative Societies at Mysore, and in several meetings, we were able to convince him that hereafter we will comply with all the rules and regulations and requirements of the Cooperative Societies Act. One Mr. Baswaraj, who was an assistant registrar at the Registrar of Cooperative Societies office, helped us a great deal in that. Finally, the Registrar of Cooperative Societies said that the registration will continue. Even if the registration had been cancelled, the association could have registered again, but we could not have used the word national or Indian in our new name. I became the president of the association in the year 2012, and I have the satisfaction of completing and executing several projects on which ISHA had been discussing for several years without taking a decision. One such issue was the establishment of a student chapter or student wing in Asia. We decided and implemented that project. A second similar issue was the establishment of special interest groups in ISHA. So we decided and established two special groups, one on central auditory processing disorders under the chairmanship of Dr. C.S. Manajan, and the second one on craniofacial anomalies with Ms. Rupa Nagarajan as the chairperson. A third issue which had been pending for a long time was the publication and management of Journal of ISHA. ISHA had discussed with several publishers but had not come to a conclusion. So I discussed the issue with Messrs. Medno, and finally, with the approval of the general body, the responsibility of publication, management, and public relations was entrusted to Messrs. Medno at a throwaway cost. One of my proposals was to acquire a piece of land for the association to establish its corporate office later at Mysore. We had discussed the issue with some private property owners. More importantly, we had discussed the issue with authorities of the Mysore Urban Development Authority and local political leadership. At that time, MUDA, the Mysore Urban Development Authority, had floated its advertisement for civic amenity sites. Unfortunately, ISHA general body did not give its approval for acquiring a piece of land. Disappointingly, some of my seniors in ISHA equated my efforts with that of a real estate agent. It was very disappointing. Setting aside the disappointment, I have no hesitation to say that ISHA has done extremely well all these years within its limitations, and it will do well in future, provided it focuses on issues rather than individuals. How do I see the future of the field? I'm sure the contents of our training programs will change in the future and for good. As I see it, there are two catalytic agents which will determine how the contents of our training program will change. One in the near time frame and the second one in the far time frame. The agent in the near time frame influencing our training programs is the national education policy of our country. The national education policy provides for choice of subjects for students at the bachelor's level itself. Students can select one paper in music, 3 papers in clinical psychology, 4 in audiology, 1 in speech, and depending upon the credits he completes and depending upon the requirements, the student will be given a diploma or a degree, etc. The system is in vogue in American universities, and that is going to come. So we need to be prepared for this change and start thinking about that. The other factor I think which would influence our training programs in the far time frame is this. We deal with phenomenon of speech, language, bilingualism, multilingualism, memory, speech perception, etc., which are all great riddles. Our attempts to explain them either as structural events or operant behavior in the past has not been satisfactory. After all, in human body, every behavior, every event will have to be explained at the molecular level. It's the chromosomes, it's the genes, it's the sequence of nucleotides, expression of enzymes, proteins, and neuroreceptors that determine every aspect of human behavior and thinking. Therefore, We need to understand these phenomena to be able to explain speech, language, language acquisition, multilingualism, etc. So in that context, our training programs have to change in the future. In the field of audiology, I feel technology is going to play a greater role, particularly in hearing evaluation and amplification strategies. Artificial intelligence and robotics will come in a big way. There might be instruments which automatically evaluate a person's hearing and determine his suitability for a given hearing aid. So we need to be prepared for all this thing. We need to change our approach to research in the coming years. Forgive me if I am wrong in making this statement, but most of us, including me, seem to do research to get a publication rather than attempting to find an answer for the fundamental questions before us. Thus, the phenomenon of speech or multilingualism or stuttering have remained unexplained. Such broad-based approach will not take us anywhere. I see there are two teams in the country who are following such a specific approach. One is the team of Dr. Sujit Kumar and Dr. Neeraj at the Department of Audiology at AIISH Mysore, who are working exclusively on vestibular mechanism. The other team has Dr. Meera and other members at Department of Speech Pathology in NIMHANS, who is working on childhood language disorders, more specifically on autism spectrum disorder. My firm belief is that such in-depth approach will bring us answers to many of the riddles that we are facing in speech language pathology and audiology. With the improvement in the socio-economic status of our people, with migration from lower middle class to upper middle class and upper middle class to upper class, there would be greater demand for speech language therapeutic services, both offline and online. We may have to face competition from special educators, clinical psychologists, and other professionals of their ilk. We need to be prepared for this. I retired from government service as a senior professor and dean of the Faculty of Neurosciences at NIMHANS in May 2017. After that, I had a serious illness to attend to and manage, which I did successfully. Later came an invitation from Sri Devaraj Aras Academy of Higher Education and Research, which is a deemed to the university at Kolar in February 2018. They wanted me to be there to establish a department of speech pathology and audiology. I went there as professor, and later they nominated me as dean of the Faculty of Allied Health and Basic Sciences. I established the Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology with state-of-the-art technology and infrastructure. I started a PhD program with fellowships. I have received approval from the Rehabilitation Council of India to start BASLP program from this academic year. I have implemented the newborn hearing screening program with grants from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysore. I have got an independent board of studies for the field at the university. And more importantly, I have a young 4-member strong faculty guiding whom gives me great satisfaction and pleasure. Even with all these things, I should say it is an eternal challenge to work with medical fraternity in a medical environment. Most of the times they are not understanding, they're too unreasonable in their demands, don't recognize our status and capabilities. Many a times it can be very frustrating. However, it's better to swallow these frustrations for the sake of the development of the field and march on. Apart from this, I'm also doing some work for the All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysore, and the Rehabilitation Council of India, New Delhi. I spare some time for improving my Sanskrit language and honing my musical skills. I have a small and beautiful family with an understanding wife, Sujata, and two daughters. My wife has met all the varied needs and demands of my two daughters and myself. My first daughter, Indu, is a computer engineer and stays in Boston, United States. Her husband, Dr. Vijay, is a molecular biologist and works for a pharmaceutical company. They have given us an adorable granddaughter, Ishita. My second daughter, Savi, is a management expert, an MBA from England, and was working for University of Reading near London. Her husband, Kirtan, is both an engineer and a management expert and has been working for Amazon International. They have given us a very sweet grandson, Suraj. Thank you, Nandu, for the initiative and the opportunity. And thanks to all those who were with me in accomplishing many of the things that I spoke of all this time. Thank you very much.